helping to sequester carbon and all that. Look, Africa cannot afford to be greenly poor. Africa has to be greenly rich. And therefore, that's why I have championed globally that the GDP of nations in Africa should be redone to take into consideration the natural capital of wealth of Africa, including that in your GDP as a green GDP, whether it's the value of your forest, your biodiversity, the value of all the other natural assets that you have. So your debt to GDP ratio, which is a measure of whether your debt is sustainable or not, goes down. And therefore, you can actually borrow more to do more. And so, you know, Africa cannot be green rich and cash poor. It's point I made. You know, and so this issue is very important. We are already working on it. We are training and supporting African statistical bureaus to begin to have new tools and ways in which they can recompute the GDP of Africa, taking into consideration the natural capital stock that we have. So that's my point with regard to the issue. And so if that happens, your currencies will become much stronger, actually, because you have a lot more wealth as a nation. Now, the other one about the debt credit rating agency, I think it's from the governor or somebody. Yeah. Yeah, from which? From
the chief taxman.
Oh, chief taxman. So, there is no doubt that there is risk, but I think that when it comes to Africa, it's more of risk, a lot more of risk perception than the real risk of investing in Africa. Don't believe me, believe the data. Now, Moody's Analytics did an assessment of the defaults on infrastructure in Africa, all over the world, over the last 14 years, in a 14-year period. What did they find? The default rate on infrastructure debt in Africa is 1.9%. The default rate in North America is 6.6%. The one in Latin America is 10.4%. In Eastern Europe is 12.5 or so percent. Western Europe and Western Asia about 4.4%. So what does that mean? That means that the default in Africa is not that high at all. And that is the data. It's not just about perception. But then, when you look at the cost of capital, the African countries, to raise capital is 3 to 5 times higher than in the areas they actually have higher default rates. So you take two countries, one in Latin America, one in Africa, both of them the same credit rating, have the same credit rating agency. BB rating, the one in Africa raises the cost of capital by 300 basis points higher than the one in Latin America. Why? That is not backed by data. And so that is why we have been saying, what you point to raise about the UNDP data, that in fact, if you considered the African countries rated properly, they will not be paying back $75 billion that you are talking about in terms of excess debt payment. So I firmly believe that the global credit rating agencies need to begin to have better data, better persons, evaluate us better based on not just your opinion, but have it counterfactual. So if you go to a medical doctor to have a scan or something, that doctor, you have a right to a second opinion, right? So go to somebody else and ask them, is that what they say? Is that correct? But African countries don't have a second opinion. And so that is why at the African Development Bank, I have championed, and I continue to push at the African Union for us to have an African credit rating agency, not a political institution, but a globally respected African rating agencies that will look at your market risk, your project risk, your political risk, counterparty risk, and all this risk, and assess you properly. And of course, that doesn't mean that all the global investors are suddenly going to be using the African Credit Rating Agency, but at least it gives you a comparison, right, of data points that they can be used between all those. So the simple point to your point is that we strongly support the establishment of the Africa Credit Rating Agency. President Ruto told me something about ratings. When there was a military coup in Nigeria Republic, he told me that Kenya's debt in terms of coupon payments went up. And when they asked them why, President Ruto said, we told them that this is Kenya. They said it's because of the coup in Niger. And they're going to pay, I think, 200 basis points more. And he said, the last time I checked in Kenya, Niger is not inside of Kenya. It's not even close to Kenya. That's how some of the rating agencies actually look at it. Once there is an event, it becomes something that's normalized all across the whole country. So that's the point I'm basically making there. On the issue of the dispute resolution and the asymmetry of bargaining power and odious debt and all of that, I think at the end of the day, the issue is making sure that debt is contracted transparently and that you negotiate what's actually in your own interest. And the point of the contract, I think the question came from here. I can see it. Yeah, okay. So the whole issue about the legal principles around this odious debt should not be paid. Well, if you get into a contract that you shouldn't get into a contract, why did you do it in the first place? So I think nations should take proper legal advice. And this is why I was making the case to you that you ought to be involved in your nations about the contractual obligations the nations are getting involved with, to be sure that the rates are in your interest. Those things actually, and where the resolution, the dispute will be settled. Why is it always being done in France for the Francophone countries? Why is it always being done in the UK? Why is it always being done in New York? Why not in Africa? So that's why in my talk I was encouraging that we strengthen our arbitral systems so that many of these things can also be done right here back in our country. Faith, thank you very much. In terms of African Legal Support Facility, I think you were somewhere there. Thank you for the ratification of that agreement. We're grateful for that. On the sovereign debt, the role of the people. Well, I think my talk is very clear about that. National debt is not something to be contracted without consultation, because you are going to pay for it with your taxes today and well into the future. So there must be a process of prioritization, a process of consultation, a process that actually shows the people how the money is going to be used. You can't just be taking loan anyhow. How is it being used? How has it been used? Who's going to be accountable for that? How much are we going to pay? And what's the implication of that on taxes when you actually get too much debt that is not sustainable? So we shouldn't be just saying we are taking debt. That's one thing. But personally, I don't believe nations can develop just like that. And neither should they be. Nations should develop by the discipline of investments. We have a lot of investments. We have a lot of assets. The issue is how do we interface global capital to unlock those assets for us? And how do we manage our assets? I think it's important, and when it comes to domestic resource mobilization, which is actually very, very important, tax to GDP ratio is what the IMF will tell you. Your tax to GDP ratio should be above 15%, and then you will grow. Well, here's the point. It's not the number. It's the tax administration. It's how the money actually gets used. We tend to tax people a lot because we think the nominal tax rates are quite low. But the other side of that is that tax are social contracts between people, citizens, and their societies. So if I am providing my own electricity, I'm digging a borehole, which in fact, by its nature, is an indication of market failure. And so I don't know why politicians always get videos to go show that they're digging boreholes. If I'm providing my own security and everything, well, I am a local government. Yeah. And so essentially what I'm saying is that government failure or government inefficiencies in the provision of public services transfers the responsibility of the government to the citizens who now bear the higher cost. So it's not just your nominal tax rate. It is the implicit tax rate. That is taxes that citizens are paying that's not reflected. So the citizens are paying a lot more than they should be paying. So the point I want to say is that don't just collect taxes you have to make sure the taxes are used well to deliver what is a social contract with society. That's really my view on this particular issue. On the AUC, well, I just checked out the comment. We work very closely with the AUC. I think the soft infrastructure point you raised is important. I'll tell you one thing about the bank. When I was elected president of the bank in 2015, I said, the bank is an institution set up to go mobilize capital for Africa's development. We have Agenda 2063. And that Agenda 2063 is going to be it's in the future. But we have to have a high discount rate to bring many things to the present. And so I set up what's called the I5s of the bank. Light up and power Africa, feed Africa, industrialize Africa, integrate Africa, and improve the quality of life of the people of Africa. And I align that completely with Agenda 2063 of the African Union to fast track that Agenda 2063. You know what had happened? In 10 years, those high fives impacted on the lives of 565 million people. From electricity to water to sanitation to agriculture to transport and all of that. So all I'm saying is that there's full alignment between us and the African Union. We must fast track the Agenda 2063. Everything good for Africa should not be in the future. It has to bring things faster for our population. On the issue of procurement, I think that Faith you raised, actually it's the opposite of everything you said. Because we actually do not select companies, contractors. No. We use national systems, procurement systems. There are two types of procurement systems we use. Your point is a good one, but we don't do that. We have an international procurement systems which we have to open up globally. If you're taking particular things from a fund, which we call the African Development Fund, so it's always globally competitive. Now we also have particular things that are done at the country level. But regardless of the two, it's not the bank that chooses the contractor, it is you. We follow and we use the national procurement laws. In fact, the bank does not get involved in picking contractors at all. So if you have contractors that are performing, you should actually go deal with them, not the African Development Bank. We don't get involved in that. And so we respect national laws, national procurement laws, and that is how all contracts of the bank are actually done, not from the African Development. Just for clarity, it's not from the bank. But having said that, I think there's always issues, Faith, about the issue of competitiveness. Sometimes if you use least cost procurement system, contractors of a particular country normally tends to get most of it. The question that is being raised is it enough just to talk about least cost procurement systems as opposed to life cycle cost? You know, if I have a least cost and it's a bad infrastructure, I still have to repair that infrastructure over time. So now we are having a conversation globally about whether we should shift from least cost production and procurement system to a full cost life cycle model for looking at procurement. So that's just for clarification, but it's a good point you raised. Yeah. Salma, I think on CSR, we were talking about mentorship. We have a program at the bank that is called Young Professional Programs. So if you want to join the Young Professional Program, the qualifications are as follows. You must have been working for 3 years. It's a great program. If you want to have an entry position at the bank, you can apply to the bank, and it's a competitive process. You get into that, you can actually get into the bank. And we have a number of young lawyers that are actually part of the young professional programs for the bank. So Faith, please see me or one of my staff while I walk out, and I'll be happy to correct you with those that can support you with that. But, you know, young lawyers are like young doctors or doctors. When they go to court and they see learned friends, learned seniors like you, go to court, you argue everything right, and yet you keep losing cases. Then they ask themselves, are they in the right profession? Why are they in Africa? Maybe they should go somewhere else. All I'm trying to say is that we cannot be letting our young brains just go outside of the continent just because we are not cleaning up our own systems. On the issue of regional integration, I was asked, what are we doing on regional integration? Yes, We support the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In the last 10 years, we've done about, is that the question over there? Regional integration question? Oh, I thought you would. Yeah. Oh, right over there. Okay, at the back. We support the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. In the last 10 years, we've done about more than $6.5 billion on integration infrastructure. That goes from power, it goes to highways, corridors, digital infrastructure, and all of that. That's one. Second, as I mentioned to you, let me give some examples. In East Africa, we are supporting the standard gauge rail that links Tanzania to DRC to Burundi. And that's about $3.5 billion that we're mobilizing capital for. That helps in regional integration. We're supporting ports, rail, airports. I just mentioned the case of Ethiopia to you. So these are all on regional integration. We are also supporting the laws of lines of credit, trade lines of credit for banks. We are also strongly supporting the development of capital markets across many countries by integrating the stock exchanges so that capital can flow, people can raise capital all across Africa. These are all part of it. So regional integration is at the core of what the African Development Bank does. On the issue of the dollars on the currencies for Africa, well, three things I would say. First, I personally do not believe that African countries should be developing or too dependent on aid. You see, if you have a walking stick and you're walking on it, and the walking stick keeps getting shorter and shorter, you keep moving forward. But that's not because you're making progress. You're about to fall. You cannot take aid and put it on your balance sheet. Why should benevolence is good, but benevolence is not an asset class, and why should that be on your balance sheet? If a country decides they don't want to do aid, well, so be it. Will you not develop without it? So I do believe that Africa should develop with pride. Africans should mobilize a lot more capital by themselves. They should use their resources more efficiently, and therefore you are not subject to conditionalities and whims and caprices of people, or you can develop without having to depend on aid. The second thing I want to say is the importance of the African Economic Monetary Union, which we are working on with the African Union on this particular area. So the more you build regional trade, the more you are able to have better currencies, the more you can actually also trade in your local currencies that are more stronger on that. The first question was on the issue of socioeconomic development. Is that Yes. Yeah. On the issue of socioeconomic development, whether it's development first or democracy first, whatever the theory is that you were saying. Well, let me say this. There is no development without a government. And I believe firmly that we've gotten it wrong by thinking government is a problem. Government is not the problem. Bad governance is the problem. Government, in my view, can play a very critical role of a market maker. There are so many missing institutions, market failure problems that governments can compensate. Why is it that government work elsewhere and not in a number of countries that I would not necessarily want to say? So all I want to say is that we need good government, accountable government, responsible government, zero corruption, make our continent, our countries a place that capital can move to, that capital can stay, that capital can grow because they trust that we're going to do the right things. I'll close with this. And we're having dinner yesterday with Honorable Justice Diani and others, having a great debate, and Prof was there also with us in that debate. And one thing that I said was about the role of public service, the public sector. The public sector, private capital will always move to where the rate of return on private capital is highest. That's standard. But that's a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition. The necessary and sufficient condition for private capital to move is that private capital will move always to where the social capital stocks are high. Let me be clear. Social capital stocks, health, water, sanitation, education, social security, good infrastructure. Why do people take money out of Africa and go and put it in Switzerland? The rate of return that they are getting is negative, but people like to live there. So the point I'm making is that it's not just putting money in Africa. Let's make Africa a place where the owners of capital want to live. When you know you are making progress is when those that own capital come to you to live there. And so we must make sure our public services are delivering quality. They move people from the private sector, they hire them and put them in the public sector. And they pay them more than they actually get from the private sector. Why? Because they value the social capital stock of their country. So all I just want to say is that the problem is never government. It's bad government that is the problem. What we should be doing is turning our government into a market maker. That's how you will get faster development. Thank you very much.
I was conversing with a friend of mine sitting in here, and the conversation was that this was a master class, wasn't it? Yes. It was a master class, isn't it? Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Desina. I think it's not within my mandate to pass a vote of thanks because a president can only be thanked by another president. So, our president, please.
I ask all of you to please stand up and let's thank again our keynote speaker today for a very amazing keynote speech. Please. Please sit down. You know, when I was reading the CV, I started asking myself several questions of life. And you know, when you say we have brilliant people, I really am humbled that you're amongst us today and that you took the time. I will share, allow me to share your CV so that people can be inspired. So that when you think you're brilliant, you can reference and ask yourself further questions. I am honored, and I want to ask Gumbo to stand up. Gumbo, please stand up. I want to thank, because in this conference we saw a lot of the hard work and a lot of support, particularly even from seniors. And Gumbo was one of them who told me, would you like the president of the African Development Bank to grace the annual conference? And he did not ask, and when I said we'd be honored, he immediately started working on it. He did not tell me it will cost this much to ensure he gets here. This will be the logistics. This will be the back and forth needed to be done. He did every single thing. He paid the cost, he facilitated to ensure that the president is amongst us today, and I'm really humbled by that level of support. Thank you very much. So today we cannot thank you enough. I'm inspired not only in terms of the speech and also rallying people together in terms of what is their role of ensuring we support the government, but also hold it accountable in terms of the funds that and the development projects that come to the country. When you share the experiences that you've had around Africa and also still leading at the front in the world, it humbles us to know that we can be part and parcel of the ecosystem to ensure that we make the country better, that we do not lose the amazing young brains looking for better opportunities outside instead of making the opportunities possible in our own country. I know our challenges in this country. The last time we had discussions about airports, it wasn't pretty. And I think the Law Society was heavily involved. But I hope that the next time we're hearing discussions about the airports, the African Development Bank will be involved, and we'll be hearing about amazing stories of how our country is going to be the major carrier in the region. And KQ will go back to being an actual pride of Africa. Lawyers play a very important part, and I think it's also important that we learn the importance of the ecosystem we play in public finance. And just the tip of the iceberg, I think we've heard of some of the opportunities. I think if you allow, you will introduce us to some of your local team that we can also learn and see how can we support, how can we work with the local team and ensure we build a lot more expertise, because I always believe in mentorship.
Can I just ask you to start? The Director General of the Bank for
Eastern Africa is here.
So thank you very much for also bringing your team. And so I think our members, lawyers, we are like sharks. So I hope you have seen it. Before even I introduce you, you'll be there. And so we are deeply honored, we are deeply grateful. I cannot say thank you enough for you coming to the Law Society of Kenya and gracing this momentous occasion. For me, it's my last annual conference. And so I want to say I've ended it with a bang. So, you know, part of this discourse was how can we make Africa the hub in terms of arbitration, and us drawing arbitration closer in terms of people looking at the country. And so none other than your friend this afternoon, today you are the front, your very good friend will be launching his book, and I want to invite Professor MATIANG'I as he comes to the front. Our very own Professor Gidu is a professor of public law at the University of Nairobi and a senior partner at Mohammed Ngai, LLP. He was the Vice President of the London Court of International Arbitration, the Vice President of the United Nations Working Group on Issues of Human Rights and Transnational Cooperation and Other Business Enterprises. He previously served as the Commissioner for the former Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, a judge to the African Court of Human and People's Rights between 2008 and 2010, as the Chief Legal Advisor to the government and titular head as the Attorney General between August 2011 and March 2018. He is also a former Special Rapporteur on contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance between 2008 and 2011. He has broad international and domestic experience, a dispute resolution, having represented Kenya as the Attorney General before the International Criminal Court at The Hague, serving as a member of the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague. He has represented numerous parties at the Supreme Court of Kenya, the Supreme Court of Uganda, and other regional litigation and dispute resolution fora. He was conferred the rank of Senior Counsel by right by the President of the Republic of Kenya. Our very own Professor MATIANG'I.
Madam President, all protocols observed, safe to recognize my learned and distinguished friend, the DBP, but having done that, I'm obliged to recognize my teacher, Professor Kibuda Kibwana. Then I stop there. Madam President thinks highly of me. This is not my book. I am the editor of the book. We first edited a book on arbitration more than 15 years ago. We thought of rewriting it, re-editing it, and it was hopelessly out of time. So what we have done is we have written a new book. And you will note the title of the book is a handbook on arbitration because it is not an academic book. It is not to contribute to jurisprudence. It is to guide arbitrators as they are working live. If you want to check how should I draft an order on interrogatories or discovery, it's a practical book. It is my great privilege to have edited with my younger, more distinguished, more energetic colleague, Professor Owino, who would have been here. Jackie? Okay. He was not able to be here. He had an urgent family commitment, so I am speaking for both of us. But let the record show that he did much more work because he's much more energetic. And I rode on his shoulders. Now, who are the other people involved in this project? Chapter 1, we had Professor Kariuki Moigwa, who wrote on the legal framework on arbitration. The arbitration agreement, we had Kamau Karori. The arbitration tribunal, we had John Ohaga. Applicable laws, we had Ms. Jackie Oyuyo. Conduct of arbitral proceedings, we had Professor Mutuma and his collaborators. Interim measures, we had my own teacher, Aaron Ringera. Award and decision, we had Jacqueline Wahenya. Recognition and enforcement was yours truly, but 70% of the work done by Jeffrey Mende. Courts and interest, we had David Onsare, who I welcome into writing in this area.
Vice President Emeritus, our chief guest of today, the Honorable Director of Public Prosecutions, as well, will receive a copy courtesy of myself. The Senior Counsel Bar Chair, please come as we launch this book as well. And our very own Supreme Court Judge, Justice Lenaola. There's no gender balance. I ask for that Dr. Mercy Jeche, please come to the front. Our Vice Chair of the Senior Counsel Bar, Joyce Majiwa. Our host in the coast, allow me to dot, Natasha, and our Commonwealth Treasurer, Maria Beneka. I've been told now there's an issue of young lawyers. So young lawyers, Gloria, you can represent the young lawyers, and then of course our very own Bumbo, please join the front. I think the people selling books, you don't have to sell books. You're not distributing. You can distribute and note the number.
Yes,
Yeah, of course.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will take 1 more minute with the permission of our President, just to mention that our members are writing good books. And I was asked to mention to you one of our members, George Omwansa of Kenya, has written a book, The Modern Law Firm Management, Setting Up, Running and Winding Up. I have perused it and found it to be useful. I recommend it to
So we are not yet done. We have our closing ceremony, but before we close, I would like to invite our sponsor from Defenders Coalition, Mr. Maura, please. Mr. Kamau, please come to the front, which will be followed by Mr. Babu Owino. as Professor is signing the books, I'm sure he'll ensure everyone gets a copy with your M-Pesa ready. But Mr. Babu, Owino, be ready. In the meantime, can we have at the front our invited guests joining the chief guest? Professor Makau Mutua, please come to the front. Our Super Senator, Edwin Sifuna, please come to the front. Please settle down, we proceed.
Thank you, President of the Law Society of Kenya, distinguished members of the Law Society of Kenya. I thank you for the opportunity to stand in front of you. My name is Kalonzo. I'm team leader of the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, popularly known as the Defenders Coalition. I bring you greetings from the human rights defenders from across the country, but above all from the Eastern Horn of Africa region.
And you've talked about
I know that
asymmetric
majority of the people who have stood here as sponsors.
But on the other hand, there is a question of odious debt. Once they have signed with this asymmetric or bargaining power, without the people
and position the country as a credible investment destination. Let me turn to the third issue I want to address, which is on strengthening commercial courts to complement public service or public financial reforms. The African Development Bank recognizes that public finance reforms must be complemented by strong legal and judicial institutions to enforce transparency, protect investor rights, and uphold the rule of law. Across the continent, the bank has invested extensively in strengthening the judiciary to complement public finance reforms. And these are not abstract investments, they are tangible, they are measurable, and they are transformative. And let me cite a few examples. In Rwanda, the bank's support for specialized commercial courts reduced dispute resolution times from over 500 days in 2009 to just 230 days in 2022. These helped them to unlock over $2 billion of foreign direct investment within that particular time period. In Cote d'Ivoire, where we are based, the modernization of commercial courts, backed by the bank, reduced average time taken to resolve commercial disputes by 40% between 2014 and 2021. And this judicial reform has contributed to sustain annual foreign direct investment inflows of over $1 billion from 2017 to 2021 that we actually did that. In Malawi, the establishment of a commercial division in the High Court under the bank-supported Malawi Competitiveness Growth Support Program reduced commercial dispute resolution times by approximately 35%, and improved its rating in terms of the enforcement of contracts from 132nd position to 109th position. In Tunisia, the bank's support for the Competitiveness Support Program, which we have with Tunisia, led to a 25% reduction in average time required to resolve commercial disputes. And of course, it improved the contract enforcement ranking of Tunisia. In Guinea, similar things were done to improve the transparency and efficiency in commercial dispute resolution, reducing case durations by over 25% over 5 years and fostering increased domestic investment. In Ghana, which is close by to where I'm from, the Business Enabling Environment Program, which we supported with the World Bank, countries are better positioned to attract investment, support growth, and achieve inclusive development. In essence, Public finance, when aligned with constitutional principles and the rule of law, becomes not just a means of managing national debt or budgets, it becomes the foundation for economic sovereignty and sustainable development all across the continent. Let me shift to the fourth issue that I want to discuss with you: parliamentary oversight and public finance. And the African is simply about disbursing. Oh, okay, Professor. All right. I think you signed quite a few other measures to development finance. Public finance, I want to be very clear, without parliamentary oversight is completely undemocratic and non-sustainable. Democratic scrutiny does not delay development. It protects development. Parliamentary approval is not an obstacle. It is a safeguard that ensures that every dollar borrowed serves the public good, not private interest. By placing legal oversight at the center of our financing architecture, the African Development Bank affirms that public resources must be governed by public will. This, ladies and gentlemen, is not just about the process, it is about justice itself. Because every financing instrument, every loan, every grant is not just a number, it is a promise. And that promise must be made before the people, through the institutions they elect to represent them, not through the fiat of any single individual. Let me turn to strengthening judicial infrastructure. A national legal system serves as its institutional backbone that ensures constitutionalism and the rule of law, safeguarding public resources, protecting the rights of citizens, creating the certainty and the predictability upon which all economic activity depends. An independent judiciary, underpinned by constitutional safeguards and protected by a clear separation of powers, ensures that the management of public finances is not left to unchecked discretion, but is bound by clear legal frameworks and subjected to impartial oversight. Where judicial independence is compromised, courts become vulnerable to political influence. Fiscal rules are bypassed, public borrowing escapes scrutiny, and public confidence collapses. That is why all across Africa, the African Development Bank has helped to place legal and judicial reforms at the center of all of our work on governance and public financial support. This is not just a policy on paper, it is impact in motion. Let me cite a few examples to make this point. In Liberia, after years of civil conflict, the African Development Bank helped to restore and equip commercial court infrastructure, digitize court systems, train judges in public finance and contract law, restoring the credibility of legal institutions and supporting fiscal oversight. In the Gambia, the bank supported reforms, modernized judicial operations and public financial management, increasing development budget execution significantly by 15%. In Mali, despite ongoing fragility, the bank helped to deploy mobile courts, train legal officers to resolve over 12,000 disputes. Many, of course, are related to land and other forms of fiscal issues that preserves the livelihoods and, of course, reduces conflict. In South Tome and Principe, a very small country, we provided technical support for the enactment of new arbitration laws aligned with international best practices, unlocking renewed investor interest in fisheries, tourism, ensuring dispute resolution frameworks. For your neighbor here in South Sudan, we supported the judicial and the commercial and judicial laws were drafted and adopted with our support, while over 150 judges have been trained, laying for them a strong foundation for investor trust, legal certainty in one of Africa's newest nations. And in Togo, the African Development Bank support contract enforcement time has dropped by 25% due to reforms in the judicial digitalization, while boosting confidence of local businesses and foreign investors. Now, let me turn to the last point that I want to make: improving access to justice. One cannot speak meaningfully about constitutionalism, the rule of law, and investment in Africa without addressing the foundational issue of access to justice and fair compensation. These are the very conditions that foster public trust and build confidence of investors to commit capital. When justice is accessible, compensation is fair, development becomes inclusive, governance and legitimacy, economic growth becomes truly sustainable. At the African Development Bank, we hold a simple but profound conviction. Development must be anchored in fairness, justice, and the protection of human dignity. Infrastructure and investment alone are not enough. We must ensure that every person impacted by our projects is treated with equity, dignity, and respect. And that is why the African Development Bank enforces a compensation policy that goes beyond formal land ownership. All across Africa, ladies and gentlemen, countless communities live and work on land under customary law or tenure, land not reflected in formal registries, but it's land upon which their entire livelihoods depend. The bank's position on this is very, very clear, and it is unequivocal. Whether or not a community holds a title deed, they are entitled to just and fair compensation. This is not theoretical. Right here in Kenya, during the construction of vital roads and all these projects that I've mentioned to you, and I can just discuss a few of them before I proceed. Look, the bank has done a lot of projects that have affected people and for which we actually work with the government well to do it. I mentioned to you the Tika Road. You have the road that is here, Bagamayo, that goes all to Horogoro, all the way to Malindi. You have the MATIANG'I Power Project. You have the Lake Turkana Power Project. You have the Last Mile Connectivity Project, which actually connects poor people, small households, small businesses to the grid. And when we started that under President Kenyatta, also with President Ruto, you know, I think your Minister of Energy was a guy called Qatar, somebody, huh? Qatar, yeah. Yeah, Charles Qatar, yeah. And we went to the Rift Valley to see one of these projects. Through that project, the Last Mile Connectivity Project, the percentage of Kenyans that were connected to electricity went from 41% to over 74%. And in numbers, that's about 2.4 million to about 9.7 million people. But I want to talk to you about my experience with Cabinet Secretary Kitcher. Yeah, Kitcher. So essentially the way it worked was we paid for small households, poor households, for the cost of connecting themselves to the grid. So the problem was not the grid, it's the connection to the grid. It's what self-select themselves away from it because they can't pay. And so we paid for it. So I went to one of the villages with Minister Keter, Cabinet Secretary Keter, and we were walking there. And my wife's name is Grace. Okay. That's my Grace. And in fact, I can't do anything live without Grace. Both Graces, that up and before it at home. Amazing Grace, I guess. But as we were walking there, the lady in front of us, her name is Grace. Not my grace, but the grace of that village, I guess. And Minister, Cabinet Secretary Keter was asking her, do you know that it's the African Development Bank that finances this project? And by the way, I was talking to the President of Yambo, and also they were talking about the Tika Road, and people thought it was done by the Chinese, so it was financed by the African Development Bank. The roads that come here, you came through here, it's all financed by the African Development Bank. The outer ring road is financed by the African Development Bank. The Tagway water supply project is done by the African Development Bank. The Kenyan urban water treatment project is funded by the African Development Bank. And the list goes on. But we don't put our billboards on things. But I was talking to, I got an advice, a free legal advice from Mohammed, of one of the lawyers, that I should start putting that. No, actually, yeah, right here. What's your name, sir? Yeah, the chairman of the Senior Council gave me free legal advice that to be advertising on our behalf many of this project. But anyway, we were going, and Ketia asked, do you know that it's the African Development Bank that I financed this project? She says, that was great. I do not know the African Development Bank. I said, do you know that the president of African Development Bank, Additional, is the one that made this possible? I said, I do not know Additional. All I know is that we once were in darkness, and now we have light. And that's what development really is about the people when they can say that. So people recognize the kind of water behind that. So. In Uganda, and by the way, about compensation, I think it's very, I was just in Addis Ababa, and I was talking to some of the Leonard French here. They are building Bishop 2 Airport, which we have been mandated arrangement for $8 billion, raising $8 billion for them. That airport will have 60 million passengers per year. By 22nd phase, it will go to 110 million passengers per year. Larger than many airports. In fact, it will be one of the largest airports and city in Africa, that we are talking about. So when you go to that kind of a project, sitting on 4,000 hectares, you have to displace people, right? But commercial Ethiopian Airlines and the government did an incredible thing. They actually took care of all the 2,800 households well ahead of time. And guess what they did? They gave every household a villa. And then they gave them irrigation systems, mechanized systems, agro-processing zones, and Ethiopia Airlines put in $350 million to support their livelihoods. That's how we should be doing things. So of course, I said to them that these are no longer project-affected people. These are project-supported people. So some people will be asking them, how come the cadastral survey left out, I want a villa too, so put me in this project. And that's the kind of thing that we want to see. In Uganda, through our support, informal urban settlers affected by development projects, they receive resettlement support, legal protection, and means to rebuild their lives. In Cote d'Ivoire, displaced farmers were compensated not just for their land, but for future income losses and supported with access to other forms of livelihood. These, dear friends, are tangible demonstrations of the rule of law in action, where fairness is not just promised, but delivered. But compensation alone is not enough. Access to justice itself is a fundamental right. That's why the African Development Bank invests in modernizing court registries, digitizing legal frameworks, expanding digital literacy through online platforms and outreach, ensuring that even the most marginalized communities understand and can claim their rights. In parallel, we advocate for the provision and the institutionalization of pro bono services within national bar associations. Justice must never be a privilege. It must be a guarantee for all. Through grievances redress systems embedded in our projects, we are seeing Tanzania, Ethiopia, and others ensure that individuals that are facing all manner of challenges, they can file their complaints, they can do that timely with independent mediation. These systems allow justice to be delivered not in theory, but in real time, at the community level, with procedural integrity and respect for human dignity. This integrated approach, fair compensation, accessible legal systems, digitized law, legal aid, robust governance of grievance systems bring the principles of constitutionalism and the rule of law into the everyday lives of African citizens. It transforms development from a top-down transaction into a participatory and accountable process. One area, as I close, that is critical for social justice and participation is improving land ownership laws to give farmers full title deeds for their lands that can act as collateral to access finance. And most importantly, laws should be changed to ensure that women have secure property rights all across Africa. No nation can develop without its women. And no bird can fly with one wing. It's not just about what's right, it's about equity, fairness, and justice. Because we know this truth. Justice is not a byproduct of development. It is the foundation of development. To conclude, distinguished learned friends, I guess I can call myself a learned friend because I'm your friend. And I hope I'm learned.